Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the hidden architects behind the stories in your favorite video games. We're talking about the masterminds who actually build the worlds you love to get lost in.
So, let's start with the basic question. Who actually writes the story in a game? Now, if your first thought is a writer, you're not wrong, but you're also not quite right. It's kind of like saying an architect just lays bricks. The full picture is way more complex and, honestly, a lot more interesting.
See, the role of a game writer is absolutely crucial. They're the ones crafting the dialogue, the lore, all that amazing text you read. But the interactive glue, the thing that holds it all together, that comes from a narrative designer. They aren't just writing a story. No, they're architecting a system for you to live inside of it.
So here's what we're going to cover. We'll break down what this architect role really means, look at how they build the blueprint for an adventure, explore how they structure player choice, see what happens when those designs go wrong, and finally, talk about why these skills are in demand far beyond the world of gaming. All right, first up, let's really dig into the core of this role and why it's so different from just, writing a script.
At its heart, a narrative designer is the bridge. They connect a game's mechanics, that's what you do, with its story, what you experience. Their job is to be an architect. They take the big ideas, the plot, the script, and they figure out, okay, how do we turn this into something you can actually play?
And you can see a really clear split here. The narrative designer builds the how and the when of a story. They're crafting the quests, setting up the triggers for events, building those complex choice and consequence systems. Then, the game writer comes in and fills that structure with the what, the powerful dialogue, the fascinating item descriptions, and even all those little lines characters shout in a fight. Okay, so how does this blueprint actually get put together? Well, it is definitely not one person typing away in a dark room. It's a huge collaborative effort. And here's the guiding principle, the one thing every good narrative designer lives by. The game always comes first. A great story in a game is one that makes the act of playing better, more meaningful, more engaging. It should never, ever get in the way. This means the narrative designer is basically a central communication hub. They're working with level designers to make sure a room is shaped just right for a dramatic scene. They're guiding environmental artists to tell little stories with the clutter in a room. They're telling technical designers what kinds of tools they need. And of course, they're working side by side with writers to make sure it all just fits. And as you can imagine, trying to manage all of this incredible complexity, well, a standard word processor is just not going to cut it, not even close. Designers use these specialized tools, things like Arcweave, Twine, or Ink, which are built from the ground up to handle branching logic, track variables, and map out the crazy, intricate web of player choice.
Which brings us to one of the biggest, most difficult challenges for any narrative designer, figuring out how much freedom the player really gets. I mean, it is such a delicate balancing act between telling a coherent story and giving you, the player, a real sense of agency.
Generally, they build one of three kinds of structures. You've got a linear story, where the author has total control and is cheap to make, but you don't get much choice. On the total opposite end, you have an emergent story, which gives you almost complete freedom, but man, it is incredibly expensive and difficult to build. And then, right in the middle, you have the branching narrative. Now, to manage the crazy high cost of branching stories, designers have this really clever trick up their sleeves called the funnel. You get to make a choice, and it leads to unique scenes and consequences, but eventually those different paths all funnel back together to a major plot point. It's a brilliant way to create the powerful illusion of endless choice while keeping the project from spiraling out of control.
But what happens when that carefully built bridge between gameplay and story just breaks? What happens when the architecture itself has a fatal flaw?
Well, this failure actually has a name: ludonarrative dissonance. It's that jarring feeling we've all had when what the game's story is telling you is happening is in complete contradiction to what the gameplay is making you do.
A classic example people always bring up is the 2013 Tomb Raider reboot. In the cutscenes, you see Lara Croft as this horrified, reluctant survivor who is deeply traumatized by her first kill. But then, just moments later, the gameplay is rewarding you for efficiently taking out dozens of enemies. That disconnect? That's a perfect example of ludonarrative dissonance. But, and this is where it gets really fascinating, sometimes designers use this dissonance on purpose. Take a game like Knights of the Old Republic 2. There's a character in it who criticizes your moral choices no matter what you do. And that's not a flaw. It's an intentional choice by the designer to use that feeling of dissonance to make you question the whole idea of simple good versus evil choices in games.
And it's exactly this kind of sophisticated, systems-based thinking that's making narrative design such a critical skill, even far beyond the world of video games.
For example, think about user experience design. A really good app basically casts you as the hero of a little story. It onboards you, it identifies your problem or conflict, it provides a solution, and then it guides you to a satisfying resolution. That whole process? It's an interactive narrative arc. And we're seeing this pop up everywhere now. It's becoming vital for creating stories that stretch across movies and games, for building the next generation of VR and AR experiences, for making educational software way more engaging, and even for designing the AI systems that might one day tell us all unique, personalized stories. So, really, the main takeaway here is this. A narrative designer isn't just a storyteller. They are a creative systems engineer. They don't just write a story, they build the very architecture, the rules, and the structures that allow a story to be played.
Which kind of leaves us with one final thought. The next time you're deep in a game, making a choice that shapes your adventure, are you just going to see the story playing out? Or are you now going to see the intricate, invisible architecture that's holding it all together?